Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
With the invention of the cell phone, we are taking more and more pictures every day. But do they capture the moment? Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. The invention of the portable camera gave people a way of preserving their past, be it their relatives or their surroundings. Now we do it instantaneously with the invention of digital photography, including the famous selfie. But how do you improve those images that will last a lifetime or more? Internationally known photographer Santino Zafarana has presented a new book filled not only with some of his finest work, but also tells us how to improve our own photos. The book is entitled Think Before You Shoot, The Art of Taking Creative Photos. And we have on the phone this morning. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Don.
So I want to turn to something that we're also sort of inundated with, and that is we are inundated with images from Ukraine. And we have video, which seems to document what is going on. But we also have still photos that pass every once in a while across our television screens, which are more interpretive, I think, than anything else. Tell me a little bit about your own reaction to the kind of images that we're seeing coming out of that conflict and the contrast between those two mediums.
Well, a photograph, it should convey an emotional quality, and it's almost, what's happening in Ukraine right now is almost inconceivable that it's happening. But a photograph brings that across to people, shows the horror that the Ukrainians are going through right now. So taking a really moment in time photograph really shows you what is happening at that time.
So, and one of the things that strikes me about video is that the pictures move in front of your eyes. But with a still photograph, it's the eyes that move across the photograph, the image.
Correct. Yes. So, as a photographer who's taken photographs during wartime as a journalism, or even an independent person taking a shot, what I've done with the book is actually just to be more conscious when we take that photograph, because we constantly take photographs and then we look at them and we don't like them. In reference to the Ukraine, I mean, it's almost, the point of view is incredibly important, and that's one of the points in my book, to show a photograph that affects the human soul and the human eye personally. That's what makes a good photograph.
Do you think we miss that attempt to get some essence out of our photographs when we take, say, photos of, say, our relatives? I know very early on, as a matter of fact, when I first got a camera, I took a photograph of my grandmother, and it was she was brightly lit, black background, but the thing that made the photograph was the expression on her face. It was always something I will always remember. And sometimes they think we just sort of take the photo and that's it.
Yeah, so that's what I try to do in my book. It's I even laid out the book as a visual journey. But I'll give you used your grandmother, same thing. My uncle, Salvatore Dolci, gave me my first camera, and he loved taking photographs. And as a little kid, I looked at his photographs, and what he got was that emotion. But what I added with the book was, and I'll give you one of the techniques which adds to that. When you're taking a photograph of a person or an object, doesn't matter what it is, but let's say a person, one of the topics is the background is actually more important than the foreground. Why? The foreground, if you're taking a portrait of someone, they will be who they are. It's capturing that moment in time. But the background, if you mess up the background, if it's too busy, it's 50% of the picture. So it's going to take away from the foreground. And then that's where you start to look at your photographs and you kind of say, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. The background equals the foreground. So if you got a great expression and if the background is something that's more complementary to the foreground, it's going to improve your photograph and increase that viewer attention to it. And so that's one of the things about the book is that I try to undo what we normally do. We click, we take photographs, we look at all these photographs, we don't like what we've taken. We're reinforcing the idea we're bad photographers. Not really. It's just that we didn't think before we shot of what we wanted in the photographs. So that's what I try to do.
And one of the other rules that I pass this on to my students, but sometimes it just doesn't seem to sink in, which is the thirds rule. Explain that to people, because it almost as if the thirds rule will create a real decent photograph almost no matter
Correct.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
Why is that important? And why is that? And why does that work?
Okay, so it's a mathematical equation. I mean, photographers take a lot from painters. So a master of the rule of thirds was Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, his Last Supper deals with that rule. So I'll give you a perfect example. If you take a photograph horizontally and you put a person in the middle, it's almost like the kiss of death. You have two sides that are negative spaces that outweigh the positive space. So in a rule of third, if you push someone over to 1/3 of the photograph, you have this space that your eye goes to and then runs back to that positive space. But an easy way to remove that sometimes is it's framing. So if you have a lot of negative space, and if it's one person, two people, just shoot it vertically. You will eliminate that negative space. But the rule of thirds usually affects horizontally more than vertically. So it's just placement. It's placement.
One of the other issues I think that comes up, and I see a lot in family photos, is this concept between light and shadows. Oftentimes, the problem is that someone, you might take a picture of them, but you're set for the brightness, say, for instance, the background, and you don't really capture their face, or that there are issues of shadows, that kind of thing. How do you eliminate that without necessarily becoming, more and more engaged and moving people around? Because people like to say, okay, take a picture and then I want to move on. But how do you approach that in terms of trying to get them in the right spot?
Yeah, so the first thing I do when I first walk into any space, outdoor or indoor space, and again, I talk about this in the book, is that look at where's the best light in the area. Because if you're carrying a camera phone or a DSLR, and people know that you're taking pictures all the time, they're going to ask you to take that photograph. So I look at where's the best light in a backyard, where's the best light in a living room or a bedroom, and I try to place them as closest to the light as possible. So there's a section in the book, I call it window and door light. We sort of, don't look at where the best light. We just automatically take my picture, and we get into this, instantly I have to press that shutter. So again, that's why I call the book Think Before You Shoot. Just look around, and door light, window light is beautiful light. And then just look at the background. Where's the best background, and go for it. And usually you will get a much better photograph because, again, we constantly make the same mistake. We're not training our brain. One thing about photographs is the proof is in the pudding. We look at our photographs and say, wow, I really like this. Let's analyze this. Why is this a good photograph? And I break it down into simple techniques. Each of the 21 techniques in the book, I break down. It's 2 paragraphs describing the technique, and the 3rd paragraph is why is this a good photograph? Let's break it down. And the photographs in the book will, justify all the techniques that I use.
It seems to me that obviously there are a lot of different rules. We've just covered some of the, I think, principal ones, but there are others. But it seems to me that you have to have a feeling for these rules, that they have to be, if not automatic, intuitive in the terms of when you're looking at something and deciding to, say, capture a different angle or notice the light. That has to be intuitive. That has to be ingrained as opposed to trying to think it out.
Well, I have a school in Los Angeles, my wife, we've had it over 20 years, and we have taken over, thousands of students who just come in with brand new cameras, and their 8-week courses. We have students that started just right at the beginning and now are shown at galleries. Now, I believe personally you could train people to be good photographers. Now, to be an amazing photographer, a great photographer, that takes a lot more work. But let's just be good photographers first. Let's be conscious of what's in front of us, and let's enjoy the journey. because part of it is if I'm just clicking and looking at the photographs and just deleting, we're reinforcing our brain. Again, we're not good photographers. I just want to break that cycle, and that's what the book does.
One of the quotes you have in there is that the photographers deal in things which are continually vanishing. And I reminds me of the fact that we certainly have relatives and people that we've known, and they're going to disappear or they're going to get older, as the case may be. And it seems to me that taking particularly good photos, but photographs in general, that they are a way of capturing something that tomorrow will very well be gone, whether it's people or it's pets or it's even just things.
Yes. I mean, a good example, like here in Los Angeles, they celebrate the Day of the Dead, and we have photographs of that. And it's interesting. We keep a legacy going with these photographs of people who have gone, or objects are gone, pets that are gone. And you know, I'll tell you a really interesting story. We had a woman come in to our class, and she was pregnant, and she also had a 3-year-old child. And by the third lesson, she came in with her photographs, and she started to cry when she showed her photographs. And why are you crying? She goes, I've learned techniques here that my first daughter, who's 3-year-old, I will never have those photographs that my second child will have. And so she learned techniques that she realized these photographs that her first 3-year-old daughter will not have them because she didn't know how to take photographs correctly. So it's very poignant to really have, when you look at an old photograph, like you were saying, if you're a relative and you see a great smile and you have a nice background and your eyes falls back to that great smile, you're interacting with that photograph and on a personal level.
The other thing that strikes me is that we concentrate obviously on the people and those kinds of things that seem important to us. But and I think you also do this in your book, is that there are also things around that are worth taking photographs of. I know I went up about a couple of weeks after 9/11. I went up to New York from Washington, D.C. and took a whole bunch of photographs. And I took photographs not only obviously of people, or I certainly took photographs of the what was left of the towers, but I also took photographs of like just things around. I recall, for instance, a photo I took of these sort of plate, this glass encasement where you had all the watches and so on and so forth. And what struck me about taking it was that you could see in the photograph the soot that had collected on it. Or there were shots I took of this, I think in one scene, I think it was in Times Square, where there were all these American flags, all kinds of sorts and sizes and that kind of thing. And the point of what I'm making is that sometimes we tend to ignore those things around us that perhaps are worth shooting.
Yeah, correct. I mean, I'm going to give you an example of everybody loves seeing a drop of water in a pond, and you see these rings around. And it's a very simple shot to take, but we're amazed about it. And it's just lines, circles in water. So how it affects the human brain, there are so many objects around us that when we look through the viewfinder and we just kind of go on that journey, like I have one in the book that is a pond that I photographed in Italy, where I was born, and it's just the wall and the water itself, the edge where those two meet, and the reflection off the water makes it a really abstract photograph that you just want to keep kind of looking, because it's a very settled-in, easy-looking photograph. And it just makes you feel good. And that's the whole point of, I think, of a good photograph, is to have this feeling that's brought across to the viewer that they could engage with, something from their past or something from their personal side of their lives.
One of the quotes you have, I think for you say that the freezing a moment recalls how true and rich an instant in life is. And it's only a millisecond in terms of a photograph and the image that you're taking, that you're capturing a life in general. Talk a little bit about that and the fact that we by taking these photographs, those moments, those instants, they tend to live on forever. I mean, you can go back and take a look at photos that you have taken in the past, and you can do it again and again. I have a photo actually of a Nicaraguan woman in some sandbags, and she's staring at me, and it's like, and I have it hanging up, and I can look at it, and I don't know necessarily relive the moment, but it certainly evokes something that on a continuous basis in terms of a photograph.
Yes, absolutely. You could tell also when you go into a gallery, let's say you go into a photo gallery, and you see people going from one photo to another, you see the rhythm of how fast people go. If they look at it, if they move too fast, that did not affect them somehow personally. So even I always, again, one of the techniques in the book is to confront your object, whatever it is. It could be a person, it could be an object. Hit it straight on first, because it will come back at you. And the viewer has the interplay with that particular photograph. So it could be, like you say, the eyes of a person looking back. I have a shot of a photograph of a dog. It's in the section called texture. And I just wanted to show the texture, but I caught the dog turning around, looking at me, and it's from behind. So you see all this great texture on him, and he's actually has a lot of mud on him. But he's looking at me and hitting straight on. And so it comes to you as the viewer, and then you go back to him and you start to look at all the texture that's going all the way up to his face. So, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that how we look and point to our camera. Again, point of view is very important. People need to constantly change their point of view, because we kind of stand in the same position taking photographs. Just a little down to the side, a little higher. But again, I confront it first, and then if I need to take a side view, but confrontation comes right back at the viewer.
I want to explore one other thing, which was the idea that, you can go on a trip and you can take a lot of photographs, and they may be very good photographs, but that in the process of taking photographs, that you take yourself outside of necessarily the experience that you might have if you weren't taking them at all. How does that interplay? Because some people will say, well, gee, I'd like to take a lot of photographs, but gee, I also want to enjoy the trip.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. Basically, people get caught up in the technology. And one of the things I do in the book is to relieve yourself from the technology, be comfortable with it, and I show that in the book. Because what happens is that we could be present. Again, I have a photograph in the book that I shot in Berlin, and I grew up in New York City and in Greenwich Village, and I kind of sit a while. If I'm on the street, I kind of wait. Like any good photojournalism, like National Geographic photographers, if they go to a city or a town or a village, and they kind of absorb themselves into that village, they get comfortable. People get comfortable with them. So imagine you're in the street, you want to take a photograph. Don't rush. No one is rushing you. Unless you're doing sports photography, and even then, you get to know the players and you have your technical down. So we need to get our technical down. And again, go through with the book, very simple, in 3 paragraphs, each technique. And then look at what you're trying to do. So that shot in Berlin there was a background, and I wanted to get this specific, they have these little carts on this main street, and the person was on a bike, and he was riding. I loved the colors he had on. So I kind of was waiting for a person to come by with this background of this really active, in this particular case, it was active background. And both of them were very active, and the colors worked really well together. So no one is rushing you. Take your time, relax, enjoy the experience of taking a photograph, because we rush too fast when we take photographs.
We've been speaking with Santino Zafarana, who has presented a new book filled with not only his fine work, but also tells you how to improve your own photographs. It's called Think Before You Shoot, The Art of Taking Creative Photographs. And we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this morning.
Thank you, Don. Have a good day.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.